a millionaire cowboy returned home early to his ranch outside Helena, Montana, and his maid whispered, "Stay quiet." The reason was shocking. They called him Thaddeus Hawthorne, the cattle king who the 500th walked away from his own empire. He'd driven Texas Longhorns through storms and Comanche raids, turned grit and risk into 10,000 acres of Montana grassland, and built a ranch house that overlooked the valley like a cathedral. Then cholera took his wife and infant son, and the man who'd faced down rustlers and blizzards couldn't face the rooms where they died. He fled to San Francisco. He let the land run itself. He became a legend of wealth, built and then abandoned a fortune with no heir, a king with no kingdom. They said the woman keeping his house was nobody special. Mrs. Colborne, the housekeeper, a slender widow in a gray wool dress, hired by some management firm out of Laramie to keep the property from falling apart before the auction. Quiet, polite, invisible. The kind of woman the West forgets as soon as she leaves the room. But they didn't see the military precision in the way she moved. They didn't notice the medals hidden in a trunk beneath her floorboards, or the way her hands never shook. Not when strangers rode up unannounced. Not when the most dangerous man in the territory came looking for something buried in that house. They didn't know she'd spent the Civil War behind enemy lines, turning Confederate officers and saving Union battalions from ambush, or that she'd been waiting 15 years for a fight that mattered. What she did in those next 6 days would expose a murderer, vindicate a dead woman's final act of courage, and rewrite the future of a man who thought he'd lost everything worth saving. It started in the darkness before dawn when a millionaire came home to find his house full of strangers. It started in the darkness before dawn when a millionaire came home to find his house full of strangers. Thaddeus Hawthorne had left San Francisco 3 days earlier. The train carried him north through California, then east across the Nevada desert, then up into Montana territory. He carried one bag. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. The cattle broker who managed his affairs thought he'd arrive Thursday. The auctioneer thought he'd arrive Friday. Thaddeus had bought a ticket for Wednesday and ridden through 2 nights without sleeping, watching the landscape shift from coast to grassland to mountains, while his chest felt tighter with every mile. He didn't want to be here, but he couldn't stay away anymore. The ranch house appeared in the gray light just before dawn. It sat on a rise overlooking 10,000 acres of grazing land, the kind of view Clara had loved. She'd wanted to see the cattle from the porch every morning. She'd wanted to watch the valley light up gold at sunrise. Thaddeus had built her exactly what she asked for, and then she died in the second bedroom on the left, holding their infant son while cholera burned through them both. 3 years. He'd stayed gone 3 years. He dismounted at the hitching post. The air smelled like pine and cold earth. Somewhere in the valley, a coyote called. The house was dark, silent. He pulled the key from his coat pocket and climbed the porch steps. The boards didn't creak. Someone had been maintaining them. He unlocked the door. A hand shot out of the darkness and clamped over his mouth. A woman's voice, low and urgent, whispered against his ear, "Stay quiet. They're upstairs." She pulled him sideways, through the entry hall, into what he remembered as the kitchen. Her grip was iron. He didn't resist because his brain was still catching up to the fact that someone was in his house, touching him, dragging him into a pantry that smelled like flour and dried meat. She released his mouth and pushed him against the back wall, her body blocking the narrow doorway. He heard the soft click of a lock. Then he heard the boots, heavy, deliberate, overhead in the bedrooms. At least 3 men, maybe 4. The sound of drawers being yanked open. Furniture scraped across wood floors. Something shattered. The woman's hand pressed flat against his chest, holding him in place. He couldn't see her face in the darkness, only her silhouette. Small, compact. Her breathing was controlled, steady, like she'd done this before. Thaddeus's heart hammered. His house. His dead wife's house. Strangers were tearing it apart. He started to move. She pressed harder, her palm a warning. He felt her shake her head. They stood like that for what felt like an hour but was probably 10 minutes. The boots moved through the upstairs rooms, Clara's old sewing room, the nursery, the master bedroom where Thaddeus hadn't slept in 3 years. Then the stairs creaked. The men were coming down. Voices now. Low, frustrated. Nothing. Check the study again. We've checked it 6 times. Then check it 7. More boot steps, doors slamming. Then, finally, the sound of the front door opening, closing, hoofbeats retreating into the distance. The woman waited another full minute before she moved. Then she pulled a match from somewhere, struck it against the door frame, and lit a candle stub on the shelf beside her. The light caught her face. Middle-aged, sharp features. Gray wool dress, practical and plain. Her hair was pinned tight under a white cap. She looked like every housekeeper Thaddeus had ever seen. Except for her eyes. Her eyes were cold and calculating and far too steady for someone who'd just hidden from armed men in a pantry. "My name is Mrs. Colborne," she said. Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "Your broker hired me 8 months ago to maintain the property." Thaddeus stared at her. Who were they? Men who work for Judge Harlan Voss. The name meant nothing to him. He said so. She nodded, like she'd expected that. "He's the territorial magistrate. Helena. He holds court over land disputes, water rights, mining claims. Very powerful. Very dangerous." "What does he want with my house?" "Not the house. Something in it." She set the candle on a shelf and brushed flour dust from her skirt. "Your wife wrote an affidavit before she died. Documentation of a murder? Judge Voss has been looking for it for 3 years." Thaddeus felt the air leave his lungs. "Clara?" She was a nurse during the cholera outbreak. Mrs. Colburn's tone didn't soften. She wasn't offering comfort. She was delivering information. She treated a woman from Helena, one of the judge's mistresses. The woman survived the fever, but she was delirious. She confessed something. Judge Voss murdered his first wife 5 years ago, staged it as a riding accident. He inherited her family's mining shares and water rights, made himself rich and untouchable. Thaddeus shook his head. None of this made sense. Clara never said anything. She documented it, names, dates, witnesses. She planned to take it to federal marshals once the outbreak ended. Mrs. Colborne met his eyes. She died before she could. The room tilted. Thaddeus put a hand against the wall. Clara had been carrying that? In her final days, while their son was dying, while she was dying, she'd been documenting a murder? Where's the affidavit now? Hidden. Mrs. Colborne crossed her arms. "I found it 3 months into my employment. I've been stalling Voss's men ever since. Forged letters, fake maintenance schedules, anything to keep them from tearing this place apart." Why? She didn't answer right away. Then, because murderers shouldn't walk free. Thaddeus studied her. She stood like someone used to being obeyed. She spoke like someone who'd given orders, not taken them. Housekeepers didn't outmaneuver territorial judges. Housekeepers didn't hide evidence and forge correspondence and stay calm while armed men searched the rooms above their heads. "Who are you?" he asked. Her expression didn't change. "I told you, Mrs. Colborne." "No." He stepped closer. The candlelight threw shadows across her face. "Housekeepers don't do what you just did. Who are you really?" For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear. Calculation. Like she was deciding how much truth to give him. "Right now," she said quietly, "that doesn't matter. What matters is that Judge Voss doesn't know you've arrived. He thinks you're coming Thursday. That gives us 2 days. 2 days for what? To decide if you're going to help me finish what your wife started." She picked up the candle. "Or if you're going to run back to San Francisco and let a murderer win." Thaddeus didn't sleep. He sat in the pantry with his back against flour sacks and watched Mrs. Colborne move through the pre-dawn house like she owned it. She checked every window. She listened at every door. She moved without sound, without wasted motion, and when the sky finally lightened to gray, she went to the kitchen and built a fire in the stove with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times in 1,000 different places. The smell of coffee filled the room. Strong, bitter. She poured 2 tin cups and set one in front of him without asking if he wanted it. "You should eat," she said. He didn't touch the cup. "Tell me who you are." "I already did." "No, you told me a name." He leaned forward. "Housekeepers don't do what you did last night. They don't hide men from judges. They don't forge letters to territorial magistrates. So who are you really?" She sat across from him at the scarred wooden table, her hands wrapped around her own cup. Steam rose between them. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she met his eyes. "I'm someone who knows how to survive dangerous men." That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." Thaddeus felt anger rise in his chest, his house, his dead wife's secrets, and this woman sitting here like she had the right to keep things from him. He stood. The chair scraped against the floor. "Then I'm riding into Helena. I'm getting the law. The law won't help you." Her voice didn't rise. It dropped, cold and precise. "Judge Voss is the law in this territory. You go to the sheriff reports to Voss. You go to the land office. Voss hears about it within the hour. The only reason you're still breathing is because he doesn't know you're here." "I don't believe you." "Then you're a fool." She stood too, smaller than him by a head, but she didn't back down. "Your wife documented a murder committed by the most powerful man in Montana Territory. That affidavit is the only evidence that could hang him. He's been hunting it for 3 years. If he finds out you've arrived, he'll accelerate everything. You'll be dead or dispossessed before you understand what's happening." Thaddeus stared at her. She stared back, and something in her eyes told him she wasn't lying. She was scared, not of him, of what would happen if he made a mistake. He sat back down. "Fine, then tell me what you want me to do. Stay hidden. Let me handle Voss's men when they come back." "And then what?" "We find the affidavit a better hiding place, somewhere they've already searched and dismissed. Then we build a case around it. Corroborating evidence, witness testimony, something that makes it impossible for Voss to bury." She took a sip of coffee. "You have resources, money, connections. I have skills. We use both." He wanted to argue. He wanted to demand answers. But the exhaustion of the night pressed down on him, and he had no better plan. So he drank the coffee. It was terrible. Too strong, no sugar. He drank it anyway. The morning passed in silence. Mrs. Process Colborne moved through the house with purpose, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, rearranging things that had already been arranged. Thaddeus watched her. She moved like a soldier. Every action deliberate, every decision calculated. When she made breakfast, she portioned flour and bacon fat like someone rationing supplies. When she swept the floor, she worked in a grid pattern, methodical and complete. Housekeepers didn't move like that. By midday, his suspicion had turned into certainty. She was hiding something, something bigger than her name. And if she wouldn't tell him, he'd find out himself. He waited until she went outside to check the property perimeter. Then he moved fast. The servants' quarters were off the kitchen, a small room with a narrow bed and a washstand. Plain, functional. Nothing personal except a single carpet bag in the corner. He searched it first. Clean dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, nothing. Then he checked under the bed. Nothing. The floorboards. He pressed each one, listening for the hollow sound that meant a hiding place. Third board from the window. It shifted under his weight. He pried it up with his knife. The trunk was small. Black leather. Locked. He broke the lock with the knife's pommel. The metal snapped. He lifted the lid. Papers. Dozens of them. He pulled the first one out. Military correspondence. Formal. Typed. Addressed to Major I. Colborne, U.S. Army Intelligence Division. Dated 1864. A commendation for service during the siege of Petersburg. Another one. Another. A dozen letters praising her tactical brilliance, her courage under fire, her ability to turn enemy officers and extract intelligence that saved Union lives. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in oilcloth, was a medal. Heavy. Gold. The ribbon was faded, but the inscription was clear. Medal of Honor. Awarded to Major Iris Mercer Colborne for extraordinary bravery in the face of enemy fire. Signed by Ulysses S. Grant. Thaddeus sat back on his heels. His hands were shaking. Major, not Mrs. Major. Footsteps on the porch. He shoved everything back into the trunk and closed the lid. He stood just as she appeared in the doorway. She looked at the broken lock, then at him. Her face went cold. "Get out. You were a soldier." "I said get out." "An intelligence officer. You ran operations behind Confederate lines." He held up one of the commendations. "You saved battalions. You turned enemy spies. You were decorated by Grant himself." She crossed the room in 3 steps and snatched the paper from his hand. "You had no right. You're in my house, hiding my wife's evidence, telling me what to do." His voice rose. "I have every right." "Then use that right to walk out the door and let Judge Voss win. Because that's what happens if you don't trust me. Trust you? I don't even know you. Yes, you do. She threw the commendation back in the trunk. You know I'm the only person in this territory who can outthink Voss. You know I've been protecting Clara's affidavit for 8 months while you were 1,000 miles away, feeling sorry for yourself. And you know that if I wanted to betray you, you'd already be dead. The words hit like a slap. Thaddeus took a step back. She didn't move. Her hands were fists at her sides. Her breathing was controlled, but her eyes burned with something he couldn't name. Rage, grief, both. Why? He asked. Why are you doing this? Her jaw tightened. Because my husband was murdered by a man just like Voss, a man who used power and money to escape justice. I testified against him. I spent a year building a case, and I watched him bribe his way to freedom while I was blacklisted from every government position I'd earned. She picked up the Medal of Honor and stared at it. I've been invisible ever since. A housekeeper, a maid, a woman no one looks at twice. I took this job because it was remote and quiet. I stayed because I found Clara's affidavit and I recognized Voss's tactics. He moves like the man who killed Jonathan. He talks like him. He believes he's untouchable. She looked up. I will not let another murderer walk free, not while I still remember how to fight. The room was silent except for the wind outside. Thaddeus looked at the medals in the trunk, at the woman standing in front of him. She wasn't asking for his permission. She was telling him the only way forward. What's the plan? He asked quietly. Her shoulders dropped. Just slightly. Relief. Voss has filed a legal claim against you. A fabricated debt. $12,000 for cattle feed. He claims your foreman ordered 2 years ago. The foreman's dead. Voss has witnesses and the falsified ledger. When you contest it, he'll seize this house as collateral and tear it apart legally. He'll find the affidavit. He'll destroy it. When's the hearing? 6 days from now. Then we have 6 days to stop him. No, she closed the trunk. We have 6 days to let him think he's already won. You stay hidden. I keep playing the scared housekeeper. We move the affidavit somewhere they've already searched, and we build evidence they can't ignore. She met his eyes. But you have to trust me. Completely. No more breaking into my things. No more questions about who I am. You do exactly what I say, when I say it, or we both lose everything. Thaddeus wanted to argue. He wanted control. But he looked at the medals again and realized he was standing in front of someone who'd fought a war and survived. Someone who'd faced down corruption and kept fighting even after she lost. Someone who saw Clara's final act of courage as worth risking everything. He nodded. Tell me what to do. Iris spread the papers across the kitchen table like a battle map. Ledgers, court filings, letters written in a clerk's cramped hand. The morning sun cut through the window and lit the documents in harsh yellow light. Judge Voss filed the claim 3 weeks ago, she said. Her finger traced a line of typed text. A cattle contract. He says your foreman ordered $12,000 worth of winter feed 2 years ago during the hard freeze, says you never paid. Thaddeus leaned over the table. I was in San Francisco 2 years ago. My foreman handled everything. Your foreman's dead. Died in a horse accident last spring. Iris tapped another document. Convenient timing. No one left to dispute Voss's version of events. It's a lie. Of course it's a lie. But Voss has 3 witnesses ready to testify they saw the feed delivered. He's got a falsified ledger with your ranch's name on every page. And he's the territorial magistrate, which means he controls the court. She looked up. When you contest the debt, he'll use his authority to seize this house as collateral, full estate inventory, legal, public. His men will tear this place apart in daylight with sheriff's deputies watching to make sure you don't interfere. Thaddeus felt the trap close around him. When's the hearing? 6 days from now, Thursday morning. Then I ride into Helena today. Get a lawyer. Fight it. No. Her voice dropped cold. The moment you show yourself, Voss moves up the timeline. He'll claim you're trying to flee your debts. He'll get an emergency seizure order. You'll be locked out of your own house while they search it top to bottom. She gathered the papers. Right now, he thinks you're still in San Francisco. He thinks he has time. That ignorance is the only advantage we have. So what do we do? We used the next 6 days to move the affidavit somewhere they've already searched and dismissed. Then we build evidence they can't ignore. Financial records showing Voss's sudden wealth after his first wife died. Testimony from anyone who remembers the accident. Anything that turns Clara's documentation from a widow's accusation into proof a federal marshal can't dismiss. Thaddeus studied her. She spoke like a strategist, like someone who'd planned operations where lives hung on every decision. You've done this before. Not like this, but close enough. And if we fail, then Voss destroys the affidavit, takes your land, and keeps killing anyone who threatens him. She met his eyes. I won't let that happen. The next 3 days turned Thaddeus's home into a prison. Iris moved through the house like a ghost, teaching him to do the same. They kept to the interior rooms during daylight, no lamps after dark, no movement near windows when riders passed on the road. She showed him the crawl space above the second floor, accessed through a panel in the linen closet, showed him the root cellar's false wall that led to a storage tunnel dug during the house's construction, showed him how to track the pattern of Voss's surveillance by the dust on the porch boards and the hoof prints in the yard. They come every other night, she whispered, crouched beside him in the attic while boots moved through the rooms below. Always the same 3 men. They search for an hour. They're getting frustrated. Thaddeus listened to the searchers tear through Clara's sewing room, heard fabric rip, heard something wooden crack. His hands balled into fists. Iris's hand closed over his. Firm, steady. A silent command, don't move. The men left at midnight. Iris waited another hour before she climbed down from the attic. Thaddeus followed, his legs cramped from staying still so long. They'll be back day after tomorrow, she said. We move the affidavit tomorrow night. She found the new hiding place on the second day. Clara's old medical supply room, a converted closet off the main bedroom. Voss's men had searched it the first week, pulled every bottle off every shelf, dumped the contents of every drawer. They found nothing because there was nothing to find, until Iris noticed the medical textbooks. They searched the room, she said, running her finger along the spines. But they didn't search the books. She pulled down a thick volume on battlefield surgery, opened it. The pages had been hollowed out, leaving a cavity just large enough for folded papers. She showed Thaddeus the affidavit, Clara's handwriting covering both sides of 3 sheets. Names, dates, the location where Voss's first wife died, the mining shares he inherited, the financial transactions that followed. This is her voice, Iris said quietly, reaching across 3 years to finish what she started. They hid it that night, sliding the hollowed book back onto the shelf between anatomy texts and surgical manuals. A hiding place Voss's men would never find because they'd already decided the room held nothing worth taking. The days blurred together, morning routines conducted in silence, meals eaten cold because smoke from the stove might be seen, hours spent in darkness, listening for hoofbeats, tracking the movements of men who wanted them both gone. But forced proximity bred something Thaddeus hadn't expected. He began to notice things. The way Iris tilted her head when she listened, reading the distance and direction of sounds he couldn't hear yet. The way she checked every window before dawn, memorizing sightlines and blind spots. The way she inspected his boots each morning before he put them on, shaking out scorpions and spiders with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times in field camps and war zones. She was protecting him. Had been protecting him since before he arrived. On the 3rd night, they sat on the kitchen floor in complete darkness. Voss's men had come and gone. The house was theirs again until the next patrol. Iris poured water from a tin pitcher into 2 cups. The sound was loud in the quiet. "Why did you leave?" she asked. Thaddeus didn't pretend not to understand. "I couldn't stay. Because of what happened here. Because I brought her here." His voice cracked. Clara wanted to be a doctor. A real one. She'd trained in Helena. She had plans to open a clinic. But I was building an empire, and I needed a wife, and she loved me enough to give up everything she wanted. He stared at the floor. "I brought her to this house, to this frontier, to the cholera that killed her and our son. She died apologizing for leaving me alone." The darkness pressed down. Iris said nothing for a long time. "Then, she didn't blame you. How would you know?" Because she spent her last days documenting a murder instead of writing you a letter telling you it was your fault. Iris's voice was soft but firm. She saw injustice, and she fought it. Even while she was dying, even while her son was dying, that's who she was. And running away from this house doesn't honor that. It just means the cholera took you too. Thaddeus felt something crack open in his chest. A wound he'd been carrying for 3 years. He didn't know if it was healing or breaking wider. He just knew it hurt. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked. Iris was quiet. Then, because my husband believed the system would protect him, he gathered evidence against a corrupt contractor. He threatened to testify. And 2 days before his Senate appearance, he was killed in a staged robbery. Her cup clinked against the floor as she set it down. "I spent a year building a case. I testified. I watched the man who killed Jonathan bribe his way to freedom while I was blacklisted from every position I'd earned. I've been invisible for 15 years, carrying skills no one wants, waiting for a fight that mattered. And this matters. This matters." She turned toward him in the darkness. He couldn't see her face, but he heard the steel in her voice. "Voss moves like the man who killed Jonathan, talks like him, believes he's untouchable. I will not let another murderer walk free." They sat in silence. Outside, a coyote called, the house creaked, and somewhere in that darkness, Thaddeus realized he wasn't alone anymore. The confession hung between them like smoke. Thaddeus stared at the floor, his chest tight. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of running. And here was this stranger telling him the cholera hadn't just taken his wife, it had taken him too. "I shouldn't have brought her here," he said quietly. "She had a future in Helena, a clinic, patients who needed her. But I was building an empire, and I needed a wife who'd fit into it." His voice cracked. "She gave up everything she wanted because she loved me, and I brought her to a place that killed her." Iris didn't respond right away. The darkness made it easier to talk, easier to say things he'd never said aloud. "The day she died," Thaddeus continued, "she was delirious from the fever, but she kept apologizing. Kept saying she was sorry for leaving me alone, like dying was something she chose." He pressed his palms against his eyes. "I should have been the one apologizing. I brought her here. I killed her." "No." Iris's voice cut through the dark. Sharp, certain. "The cholera killed her. Not you. I made the choice that put her in its path. She made the choice to come with you. She was a grown woman, a trained nurse. She knew the risks of frontier life better than you did." Iris shifted position. He heard her back settle against the cabinet. "You think she blamed you?" "She apologized with her last breath. For dying, not for being here." Iris's tone softened just slightly. "She spent her final days documenting a murder, Thaddeus, not writing you letters about how you failed her. She saw injustice, and she fought it, even while her son was dying. Even while she was dying, that's who she was." A pause. "Running from this house doesn't honor that. It just means you let the cholera take you both." The words hit him like a fist. He'd spent 3 years believing his grief was penance, that staying away was the punishment he deserved. But Iris was right. Clara wouldn't have wanted this. She would have wanted him to fight. "Your husband," Thaddeus said. "What happened to him?" Iris was quiet for a long moment. Then Jonathan believed in the system. He was a good man, an honest man. He discovered a federal contractor was stealing military supplies and selling them to frontier outposts at triple the cost. Thousands of dollars. Soldiers going without because someone in Washington was getting rich. Her voice stayed level, controlled. Jonathan gathered evidence, account books, shipping manifests, testimony from quartermasters who'd been threatened into silence. He was scheduled to testify before a Senate committee. And 2 days before the hearing, he was killed in a robbery, 3 blocks from our home. They took his watch and his wallet and left him bleeding in an alley. The control in her voice finally cracked, just slightly. The contractor was acquitted 6 months later. Insufficient evidence, Jonathan's documents had disappeared. The quartermasters recanted their testimony. And I was told my continued involvement in the matter was inappropriate for a military widow. Thaddeus heard the rage beneath the words. The wound that had never healed. "I spent 15 years invisible after that," Iris said, "taking jobs no one remembers, keeping houses for people who don't see me, carrying skills the world decided it didn't need anymore." She took a breath. When I found Clara's affidavit, I recognized it. The same tactics, the same arrogance. A powerful man who believes he's untouchable because the system protects him. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I will not let another murderer walk free. Not while I still remember how to fight. They sat in silence. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the valley, an owl called. She hid it in the medical supply room, Iris said. Clara, that's where I found it. Tucked inside a Bible on the shelf. Show me. They moved through the dark house like shadows. No candles, no lamps. Iris led him up the stairs, avoiding the boards that creaked. The medical supply room was small. A converted closet off the master bedroom. It still smelled like carbolic and dried herbs. Iris struck a match. The small flame threw shadows across shelves lined with bottles and books. Medical texts, anatomy diagrams, field surgery manuals Clara had studied before she married him. Voss's men searched this room the first week, Iris said. She pulled down a thick volume on battlefield surgery, but they didn't search the books. She opened it. The pages had been hollowed out, a cavity just large enough for folded papers. Inside were 3 sheets covered in Clara's handwriting. Names. Dates. The location where Voss's first wife had died. The mining shares he'd inherited. Financial transactions showing sudden wealth. Thaddeus touched the pages. His wife's final act, her voice reaching across 3 years. This is evidence, he said. No. Iris's voice was gentle. This is Clara finishing what she started. She began to close the book, then stopped. Her hands were shaking. Just slightly, but enough that Thaddeus noticed. The first crack in her armor. Are you afraid? He asked. Iris looked at him. The match was burning down. In its dying light, he saw her face. Tired, determined, human. Yes, she said, but not of Voss. Then what? I'm afraid of failing her, the way I failed Jonathan. She closed the book. The match went out. Darkness returned. I'm afraid I'll get this close to justice and watch it slip away again. Thaddeus reached out in the dark, found her shoulder. You didn't fail anyone. You're still here, still fighting. Jonathan's not. No, but his fight didn't die with him. You carried it forward for 15 years. That's not failure. He squeezed her shoulder. That's loyalty. Iris didn't respond, but he felt some of the tension leave her. Then she stiffened. Listen. He heard it, hoofbeats. Distant but getting closer. Multiple horses. Coming from the road, Iris moved fast. She grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the medical room, down the hall, into the attic access. They climbed into the crawl space and pulled the panel shut just as the front door rattled. Someone testing the lock. Boot steps on the porch, men's voices. Low, frustrated. 3 days, Iris whispered against his ear. We have 3 days left before the hearing. The boots moved around the house, checking windows, testing doors, closer surveillance than before. Voss was tightening the noose. I found her, Iris breathed. Voss's mistress, she's alive. Remarried. Living in Butte under a different name. Respectable widow now. A pause. But reaching her will be dangerous. The fire came at midnight on the 4th night. Thaddeus woke to the smell of smoke. Not the clean smell of a wood stove. The sharp, hungry smell of something burning that shouldn't be. He sat up in the attic crawl space where he'd been sleeping. Every sense screaming danger. Orange light flickered through the cracks in the roof boards. He scrambled to the attic window. The carriage house was engulfed. Flames climbed 30 feet into the black sky, throwing wild shadows across the yard. As he watched, the eastern barn caught. Fire leaped from one roof to the other like something alive and vengeful. 4 men on horseback sat in the road, silhouetted against the blaze, watching. Waiting. Rage hit Thaddeus like a fist. His property, his land. They were burning it in front of him like he was nothing, like he didn't exist. He grabbed his Winchester and started for the ladder. A hand caught his wrist. Iron grip. Iris, don't. They're burning my ranch. That's what they want. Her voice was cold, precise. They want you to come out shooting. Give them an excuse to kill you in self-defense. Then Voss claims the land legally and destroys the affidavit during the estate seizure. Thaddeus yanked against her grip. She didn't let go. Look at them, she said. They're waiting for you, rifles ready. This isn't arson. It's a trap. Below them, the carriage house collapsed. Sparks spiraled into the night. The heat was intense even from 100 yards away. Thaddeus felt it through the window, felt it burning in his chest. I can't just watch. Yes, you can. Because if you die, Clara's affidavit dies with you. Iris released his wrist. Come with me, now. She moved fast, leading him down through the house in complete darkness. No candles, no lamps, just her hand on his arm and her whispered directions in his ear. They descended to the kitchen, then to the root cellar. The air grew cold, damp. The smell of earth and old potatoes. Iris struck a match. The flame caught on a candle stub. She moved to the back wall and pressed her palm against a support beam. Something clicked. A section of the wall swung inward on hidden hinges. Behind it was darkness and the smell of old stone. Chinese laborers built this during the house construction, she said. Tunnels connecting the outbuildings for winter access. I found it 3 days ago. She stepped into the passage. Thaddeus followed. The ceiling was low. He had to duck. The walls were rough-cut stone, slick with moisture. Their footsteps echoed in the narrow space. Behind them, through the walls, he heard the fire roar. They crawled through darkness. The tunnels sloped down, then up, turned left, turned right. Thaddeus lost all sense of direction. He just followed Iris's candle and tried not to think about the tons of earth above his head. After what felt like an hour but was probably 10 minutes, fresh air touched his face. Iris pushed open a wooden hatch and climbed out. Thaddeus emerged into a grove of cottonwood trees a quarter-mile from the house. The fire lit up the night like a second sun. Both buildings were fully engulfed now. The carriage house had collapsed into coals. The barn was going fast, its frame buckling, roof tiles sliding off in avalanches of sparks. The 4 riders still sat in the road, watching. One of them laughed. The sound carried across the distance. Thaddeus's hands shook. His whole body shook. 3 years he'd stayed away from this place. 3 years of grief and guilt. And now men were burning it down because a judge wanted to hide a murder. Iris stood beside him. Her hands were steady. This is what powerful men do when they're afraid, she said quietly. They destroy, they intimidate, they make you feel small. She looked at him. It means we're winning. Winning? His voice came out harsh. Broken. They just burned half my property. They're desperate. Voss knows time is running out. He knows we're building something he can't stop, so he's trying to flush you out, trying to force your hand. She turned to face him fully. Don't let him. Thaddeus stared at the flames, at his ranch burning, at the monument to grief he'd built for Clara going up in smoke and ash, and he realized Iris was right. The fire was a message, but it was also a mistake. Voss had shown his hand, shown his fear, and in doing so, he'd changed the game. I can't stay hidden anymore, Thaddeus said. If I don't show myself, Voss will claim the ranch is abandoned. He'll accelerate the seizure. I know, which means his legal trap snaps shut. Yes? Iris's face was calm in the firelight. We have 2 days, maybe less. Then what do we do? She looked back at the fire, at the men in the road, at the empire of smoke and flame that had once been part of Thaddeus's operation. When she spoke, her voice carried something he hadn't heard before. Not fear, not anger, something colder, deadlier. We stop hiding. You ride into Helena tomorrow morning. Make your presence known. Let Voss accelerate the hearing. That's suicide. He owns the court. He owns the witnesses. We have no defense. You don't. She met his eyes. But I do. The flames reflected in her eyes. For a moment, Thaddeus saw past the housekeeper, past the widow, past the woman who'd been hiding for 15 years. He saw Major Iris Mercer, the intelligence officer who'd turned Confederate spies and saved Union battalions. The woman who'd spent a year building a case against her husband's killer and testified even when she knew it would cost her everything. What are you planning? He asked. I have one move left. A federal marshal, old military contact. He owes me his life from a mission in '63. She turned back to the fire. I sent him a telegram 2 days ago, told him about Clara's affidavit, about Voss's network, asked for an emergency warrant. Will he come? I don't know. But whether he does or not, I'm walking into that courtroom with everything I've compiled. 8 months of evidence. Judge Voss won't just lose, he'll be destroyed. They'll know who you are, everyone you've been hiding from for 15 years. I know. Iris, some fights are worth the cost. She looked at him, really looked at him. You asked me why I'm doing this. This is why. Not for Clara, not for you, for Jonathan. For every fight I walked away from because I was scared or tired or broken. Her voice dropped. This is the one I finish. They stood in the cottonwood grove and watched his ranch burn. The riders left around 2 in the morning. The fires burned until dawn. By the time the sun rose, there was nothing left but smoking foundations and twisted metal. Thaddeus made his decision as the first light touched the valley. I ride into Helena at noon, he said. Iris nodded. 48 hours until Voss moves the hearing up, maybe less. And you? I get ready to walk into that courtroom and end him. She turned toward the house, toward what was left of it. But it will expose me completely. Thaddeus rode into Helena at noon, with ash still on his clothes and rage in his chest. The town sprawled along Last Chance Gulch, all dust and wood and the sharp smell of coal smoke from the smelters. Main Street was crowded. Saturday, freight wagons. Miners spending their pay. Women in bonnets carrying baskets. Everyone going about their business like the world wasn't burning down. He tied his horse outside the land office and walked in. The clerk looked up. Recognition flashed across his face. Then fear. Mr. Hawthorne, we weren't expecting you until... I'm here now. I need to file a statement. My property was attacked last night. Arson. I want it on record. The clerk's hands trembled as he pulled out a form. Of course. I'll need details. Time of attack, witnesses, estimated damages. Thaddeus gave him everything. Names. Descriptions of the riders, the buildings destroyed. By the time he finished, 3 other clerks had gathered near the back wall, whispering. One of them slipped out the side door. Word was spreading. Within the hour, the whole town knew. The Millionaire Cowboy was back, and Judge Voss's men had burned his ranch. Thaddeus went to his cattle broker's office next. Malcolm Hayes ran the operation from a cramped second-floor room above the mercantile. He was a thin man with wire spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He looked up when Thaddeus entered, and his face went pale. Thaddeus, I didn't know you were coming. Neither did Voss. That was the point. Malcolm stood, shuffled papers nervously. I heard about the fire. I'm sorry, truly, but there's something you need to know. Tell me. The hearing. Voss moved it up. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Thaddeus felt the trap close. How? Emergency petition. Claims you're a flight risk. Says the arson proves the property's in dispute and needs immediate resolution. Malcolm handed him a court notice. He's got 3 witnesses ready to testify. Got the ledger filed. I tried to find people to speak on your behalf, but his voice dropped. They're scared, Thaddeus. Or they've been paid off. Or both. Who? Everyone. Your old foreman, the merchants you did business with, even the bank manager who handled your accounts. Malcolm sat back down heavily. Voss has been working on this for months. He owns this town. And now he's got you exactly where he wants you. Thaddeus stood at the window. Below, people moved through the street. Normal life. But he could feel eyes on him. Whispers. The town watching to see what he'd do. What about lawyers? The good ones won't touch it. The bad ones can't help you. Malcolm looked miserable. I'm sorry, you're walking into a slaughter. Thaddeus left the office. The sun was high and hot. He walked to the telegraph office. Iris had given him instructions, specific codes, names he wouldn't recognize. She was already moving. Inside the telegraph office, a different clerk. Younger. He looked at Thaddeus without fear. Just curiosity. Help you? Messages for Thaddeus Hawthorne? The clerk checked his log. Shook his head. Nothing yet, sir. Yet, that meant Iris had been here. Had sent her telegrams. Now, they were waiting. Thaddeus stepped back outside. The courthouse sat at the end of Main Street. Gray stone. Tall windows. Judge Voss's domain. Tomorrow morning, Thaddeus would walk through those doors with no defense, no witnesses, and no hope of winning. Unless Iris's federal marshal arrived. Unless her plan worked. unless 15 years of invisibility ended with one explosive move that would destroy her forever. He rode back to the ranch as the sun dropped toward the mountains. The burned buildings were still smoking. The smell of charred wood hung thick in the air. Iris was on the porch, waiting. She'd changed clothes. Dark traveling dress, her hair pinned tight. She looked like she was preparing for war. "It's done?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. She nodded. No surprise. She'd expected this. "And your broker?" "Voss owns the town. No witnesses. No defense. We're alone." "Not alone." She handed him a folded paper, a telegram response. 3 words, en route, stop Carson. Relief hit him like a wave. He's coming. Maybe. There's no guarantee he'll arrive in time. And even if he does, Voss controls the courthouse. He can delay. He can dismiss. He can do anything he wants until federal authority physically walks through the door. She folded the telegram carefully. "Which means I can't wait for Carson." "What are you going to do?" "Walk into that courtroom myself. Not as Mrs. Colborne, as Major Iris Mercer, in uniform, with every piece of evidence I've compiled for 8 months. Her voice was steady, resolved. "I'll read Clara's affidavit aloud. I'll present my intelligence reports. I'll make it impossible for Voss to silence me without proving everything I'm saying is true. They'll know who you are. Yes. Every enemy you've been hiding from for 15 years. Yes. Iris," his chest felt tight. "You don't have to do this." "I do." She met his eyes. "Clara documented a murder while she was dying. She carried that weight alone because she believed justice mattered more than her own survival. I've spent 15 years running, hiding, letting murderers and thieves and corrupt men walk free because I was too broken to fight." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not broken anymore." They stood on the porch as twilight settled over the valley. The burned buildings cast long shadows. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The ranch was still alive, still breathing, still worth defending. "You don't owe this to Clara," Thaddeus said quietly, "or to me." "I know." "Then why?" Iris looked out at the valley, at the land Clara had loved, at the house where she died trying to expose evil. When she spoke, her voice carried something Thaddeus hadn't heard before. Not fear, not doubt, peace. "Because I'm not doing it for you, I'm not doing it for Clara." She turned to face him. "I'm doing it for Jonathan. For every fight I walked away from because I was scared or tired or convinced I'd already lost. This is the one I finish." The Helena Territorial Courthouse smelled like old wood and stale sweat. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Ranchers, merchants, men who'd come to watch the Millionaire Cowboy lose everything to Judge Harlan Voss. The morning light cut through tall windows, harsh and unforgiving. Thaddeus sat at the defendant's table with Malcolm Hayes, his cattle broker. Malcolm had a folder of papers that meant nothing. No witnesses, no evidence, no defense. Just the formality of watching a predetermined outcome unfold. Judge Voss sat behind the bench in his black robes. He was a heavy man in his 50s, with silver hair and a face that wore power like a second skin. He looked at Thaddeus the way a man looks at property he's already purchased. "This court is now in session." Voss's voice filled the room. Smooth, confident. "The matter before us is simple. A debt owed. A debt unpaid. Mr. Hayes, you may present your client's defense." Malcolm stood. His hands shook. "Your Honor, my client disputes the existence of this debt. The alleged contract was never authorized by Mr. Hawthorne personally, and the foreman who supposedly negotiated it is deceased and cannot testify to. Do you have documentation proving the contract didn't exist?" "No, but do you have witnesses who can contradict the plaintiff's account?" Malcolm's jaw tightened. "No, Your Honor." "Then sit down." Voss turned to his own lawyer, a thin man with oiled hair. "Call your first witness." 3 men testified. All of them claimed they'd delivered feed to the Hawthorne Ranch 2 winters ago. All of them swore Thaddeus never paid. Their stories matched perfectly, too perfectly. But no one questioned them. Voss controlled the room. The falsified ledger was entered as evidence. $12,000 in neat columns. Thaddeus's signature forged at the bottom. The gallery watched in silence. This wasn't a trial. It was theater. And everyone knew how it would end. Voss leaned back in his chair. Mr. Hawthorne, do you have anything to say before I render judgment? Thaddeus stood. His heart pounded. He thought about Clara, about the affidavit hidden in her medical book, about Iris, who'd spent 8 months protecting a dead woman's final act of courage. This debt is a lie, he said, and you know it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Voss's expression didn't change. Careful, Mr. Ross. Hawthorne, accusing a territorial judge of corruption is a serious matter. Then let's talk about serious matters. Let's talk about your first wife. Let's talk about how she died. The courtroom went dead silent. Voss's face darkened. You're out of order. Am I? Because I have evidence that says the courthouse doors swung open. Every head turned. A woman walked down the center aisle. She wore a Union Army officer's uniform, dark blue wool with brass buttons. Medals covered her chest. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her spine was straight. She moved like someone who'd commanded soldiers and expected to be obeyed. Thaddeus's breath caught. Iris. But this wasn't the housekeeper he'd hidden with for a week. This was Major Iris Mercer, and she looked like she could tear down empires. She stopped at the front of the courtroom and faced the bench. Your Honor, I am Major Iris Mercer, United States Army Intelligence, retired. I request permission to present evidence of judicial corruption relevant to this case. Voss stared at her. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. This is highly irregular. So is a judge presiding over his own fraudulent claim. Her voice was cold, precise. But here we are. The gallery erupted. Shouts, gasps. Voss slammed his gavel. Order, I will have order. He pointed at Iris. Madam, you have no standing in this court. Remove yourself immediately, or I'll have you arrested for contempt. Then arrest me. But first, let me read something. She opened the portfolio and pulled out 3 pages. This is an affidavit written by Clara Hawthorne 3 years ago. It documents a confession made by your mistress during the cholera outbreak. Iris's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the room. A confession that you murdered your first wife to inherit her mining shares. The courtroom exploded. Voss shot to his feet. That's slander. It's truth. Iris read from the pages, her voice steady. Unwavering names, dates, the location of the riding accident, the financial transactions that followed, Clara's handwriting documenting every detail the mistress had confessed in fever-stricken delirium. Voss's lawyer tried to object, tried to shut her down, but the gallery was listening now, leaning forward, hungry for every word. Furthermore, Iris continued, producing a second set of documents, I've spent 8 months compiling intelligence reports connecting Judge Voss to a network of corrupt territorial judges, land fraud in Butte, witness intimidation in Billings, 3 suspicious deaths across the territory, all covered up, all protected. She looked directly at Voss. Your empire ends today. The main doors opened again. Federal Marshal Thomas Carson entered with 4 deputies. He was a tall man with gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen war and survived. He walked straight to the bench. Judge Voss, I have a warrant signed by the territorial governor for your arrest on charges of murder, corruption, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted into chaos. People shouting, witnesses scrambling for the exits. Voss's lawyer went pale and backed away from the bench. Voss tried to bluster. This is absurd. You have no authority here. I am a territorial magistrate, and I where? Carson's voice cut through the noise. You were a magistrate. Now, you're under arrest. Voss's paid witnesses recanted on the spot, stammering, terrified. They'd been paid to lie, but they hadn't signed up for this. They fled through the side doors like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Carson turned to Iris. Major Mercer, good to see you again. Marshal, thank you for coming. I owe you my life. This is the least I can do. He gestured to his deputies. They moved to either side of Voss, who looked like a man watching his world collapse in real time. Wait. Iris held up a hand. She looked at the crowd. There's one more witness. Someone who can corroborate every word of Clara Hawthorne's affidavit. A woman entered from the side chamber. Middle-aged, respectable dress, nervous but determined. Thaddeus didn't recognize her, but Voss did. The color drained from his face. "This is Mrs. Sarah Fletcher," Iris said. "Formerly Miss Sarah Dalton, Judge Voss's mistress during the cholera outbreak, now a widow living in Butte under federal protection." Sarah Fletcher looked at Voss. "I told Clara Hawthorne the truth. You murdered your wife. You planned it with your hired man. I heard every word." Her voice shook but held. "I've been scared for 5 years, but I'm not scared anymore." Voss's face twisted. Rage, fear, hatred. "You're all going to regret this. Every single one of you." Carson's deputies moved forward. They put Voss in chains. Right there, in his own courtroom, in front of everyone who'd feared him. As they led him past Thaddeus, Voss stopped, locked eyes with him. Spit venom in his final words. "This doesn't bring her back. Your precious Clara. She's still dead. This changes nothing." Thaddeus stood, looked Voss in the eye. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 years of grief and 1 week of learning what his wife had died fighting for. "No. But it finishes what she started." 2 weeks after Judge Voss was led away in chains, the falsified debt was voided. Thaddeus's ranch was cleared. The federal investigation began, spreading across 3 territories like wildfire through dry grass. Clara's affidavit became the key that unlocked everything: land fraud, witness intimidation, murders covered up by judges who believed they were untouchable. The woman who died trying to expose one murderer ended up exposing an entire corrupt system. Iris was offered a formal position: federal investigator. Good pay, respect, authority. She declined within an hour. Thaddeus found her on the 3rd day after the trial, standing in the ruins of the burned barn. The smell of charred wood still hung in the air. She was measuring boards, calculating lumber, planning. "We can rebuild it," she said without looking at him. "Foundation's still good. Frame needs replacing, but the stone base held." Iris. "I talked to the mill in Helena. They can deliver planks by next week if—" "Iris." He stepped closer. "Stay." She stopped talking, her hands stilled on the measuring tape. "Not as staff," he said. "Not as hired protection. As a partner, someone who sees this house as more than a tomb. Someone who," his voice caught, "someone who knew Clara's courage before I did." Iris turned to face him. Her eyes were guarded. Careful. 15 years of running had taught her not to trust permanence. "I don't know how to stay," she said quietly. "Neither do I, but I'm done running." He looked at the burned barn, at the house where his wife had died, at the valley that stretched 10,000 acres in every direction. "This place isn't a monument to grief anymore. It's land worth defending. And I don't want to defend it alone." She studied him, then looked back at the barn. "The rebuild will take a month, maybe more. Then we've got time to learn." They rebuilt the barn together. Iris worked like someone who'd built field fortifications during the war, efficient, methodical, no wasted motion. Thaddeus worked like someone who'd spent his youth on cattle drives, stubborn, determined, refusing to quit until the job was done. They didn't talk much during the days. But at night, sitting on the porch while the valley cooled, words came easier. Voss's trial lasted 2 weeks. They testified side by side. Iris in her uniform, Thaddeus in his best suit. The courtroom was packed every day. People came from 3 territories to watch a corrupt judge face justice. When the verdict came down guilty on all counts, life sentence, the gallery erupted in cheers. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. They wanted Iris's story. The major who'd become a housekeeper. The intelligence officer who'd brought down a territorial corruption ring. She answered their questions with the same cold precision she'd used in the courtroom, then walked away without looking back. "Do you regret it?" Thaddeus asked that night. "Losing your anonymity?" Iris sat on the porch railing, watching stars appear over the mountains. "No. I regret the 15 years I spent hiding. But this," she gestured toward the ranch, "this was worth it." The barn was finished on a cold October morning, new wood, strong frame, a structure that would stand for decades. They stood back and looked at what they built together, and something shifted between them. The fight was over. The danger had passed. Now they had to decide what came next. A week later, Thaddeus woke before dawn and found Iris already on the porch. She was watching the cattle move through the valley, their breath visible in the cold air. The mountains were turning orange with first light. He stood beside her. The silence stretched comfortable between them. "Are you staying?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Then, I already have. Because I spent 15 years running from fights I couldn't win. And then I found one I could." She looked at him. "You asked me once why I was doing this. I told you it was for Jonathan. For every fight I walked away from." She paused. "But that wasn't the whole truth. What's the rest of it?" "I stayed because this place felt like somewhere I could stop running. Because you treated me like a partner, not hired help. Because when I told you I'd been invisible for 15 years, you saw me anyway." Her voice softened. "And because Clara would have liked me, would have trusted me to finish her fight." Thaddeus felt something loosen in his chest, a weight he'd been carrying for 3 years. "She would have. And she'd be glad you found the affidavit. Glad you were the one who used it." "You think she knew?" Iris asked. "When she hid it in that Bible, that someone like me would find it?" "I think Clara understood how the world worked. She knew powerful men protect each other. She knew a regular person couldn't fight a territorial judge and win." He looked out at the valley. But a major in Army intelligence? Someone who'd spent a war turning enemy officers and saving battalions? Someone who'd already testified against a corrupt contractor and survived being blacklisted? He smiled. "Yeah, I think she knew exactly what she was doing." The sun broke over the mountains. Gold light spilled across the valley, turning everything warm. The cattle moved through it like dark shapes in a painting. The house behind them stood solid. The barn they'd rebuilt together caught the light. Iris turned to face him fully. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked at peace. "I need to tell you something," she said. "What?" "My first name. My real first name. The one I used before the war, before I became Major Mercer." She took a breath. "It's Rose. Rose Iris Mercer. My mother called me Rose." Thaddeus felt the weight of what she'd just given him. A name she hadn't spoken in 20 years. A piece of herself she'd kept buried because it belonged to a life that no longer existed. "Rose," he said softly. She nodded. Tears shone in her eyes but didn't fall. "I thought I'd never say it again. Thought that girl died somewhere between Antietam and Washington. But standing here, watching the sun come up over land worth defending," her voice broke, "I think maybe she's still here." Thaddeus reached for her hand. She took it. They stood together on the porch as the sun rose over the valley. Two people who'd spent years running from grief and guilt and ghosts, finally free. Finally home. The people of Helena still talk about that autumn. About the millionaire cowboy who came home to die and found a reason to live. About the housekeeper who wore a major's uniform and brought down a corrupt judge. About how a dead woman's courage reached across 3 years to expose a system that thought it was untouchable. They tell the story on cold nights, around fires, and in saloons, and every time they tell it, it grows a little bigger, a little more mythic. Because some stories aren't just about what happened. They're about what's possible when people refuse to let the powerful get away with murder. The past doesn't have to be a prison. Sometimes it's the key to the justice you thought you'd never see and the future you didn't know you deserved. And that is how a widow who remembered everything helped a broken man find his way home. And how together they proved that some fights are worth finishing no matter how long they take. What fight have you been running from that might be worth turning back to face? If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the frontier was built by people who refused to give up, even when the odds looked impossible. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward the horizon.